Welcome back, guys. Welcome to day 4 of our Learn with ChatGPT. We're gonna continue on with our application, pick off where we left off on the last on day 3. So, for those of you that are new to our stream, what we aim to achieve here is to try to use ChatGPT to help us find tutorials, resources, whatever we need to make a full stack application. I am a co-founder of Y Academy. I run this on the side just for fun. The goal of the academy is to help students find their passions and figure out what they want to do in the future early on before they go to college, so that they can have a better chance at choosing something they love to do and going through college smoothly. So in order to do that, I was thinking that we could build a little application to help students decide what they want to major in, kind of learn about different majors, learn about different career paths that people may have, and I want to build an application to help these students. I used to do web development, but this was many years ago. This was with Java and Python. Nowadays, people use JavaScript, and because I work with hardware, I'm close to firmware engineering, I don't get a chance to touch software engineering as much. This whole series is to show you guys that anybody can learn how to code with the resources we have nowadays, especially with ChatGPT. ChatGPT, if you just give it some questions and you expect it to answer, like do your homework for you, you're not going to learn anything. But I think it's a great resource if you want to use it to find resources to help you develop your own skills. So if you've been watching the stream, we're on basically day 4 of what it suggested us to do. We're going through the React.js tutorial, and we finished the first page, which claimed that we should know 80% of the material that we need for React, which is awesome. In just one day, we basically covered 80% of the material, which is crazy. I'm gonna switch to my computer screen real quick. I have some notes for the 4th stream. We can take a look at that in a second. I just wanna go over what we're working on and where we are. So I like to learn with a roadmap. I find it really difficult to learn if I don't have a roadmap, because without a roadmap, I don't know where I'm going, what I'm trying to accomplish, and what I'm doing. So let's take a look at the roadmap. We made this last week, or not last week, but the last session. We formalized this. Originally, we had it on an iPad, and with the iPad, it looked super messy. Now we have it in a more formalized version, which is pretty cool. I'm gonna highlight the area that we have been working on right now. I'm gonna use a red heart. So what are we working on right now? So this application, there's a lot of parts to it, and it looks like it could be pretty complicated. So that's why we made this thing. Just a reminder, on the left-hand side, we have the server side application that we have to make. We haven't gotten there yet. ChatGPT has suggested that we work on React.js first. So that's what we did. Actually, ChatGPT asked us to do Node.js first. So we first created a Node.js project, downloaded Node, and then we just ran one line of code to pull up the template code, and the template code pointed us to React.js. So I'm gonna put a little, let's see, what can we put? Oh, I like that. Okay, so we can put a little fire, maybe a little fire next to the ones we've touched. So we've touched, okay. I guess I don't use Figma enough. This is just React. We need to use these as stickers. We're gonna put a little +1 next to the ones that we've touched but haven't really gone through fully. And then we're gonna put a star on the area that we're working on right now. I find it really useful to look at roadmaps as we're learning things, because you get a better idea how much you still need to learn and where you're at. So we're on React.js. Let's go back to our tutorial. quick start guide. So if you're following along from our video series, we basically finished the first page of this React tutorial. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. So we're on react.dev/learn. I'm gonna put this on our Discord channel. And just a reminder, we have a Discord channel where we're basically where the community can interact with us. And apologize, today is really hot today, so I'm a little bit out of it. But we do have a Discord channel where I hope that we can build a large community. If you guys join the Discord channel, you can feel free to talk with me. We can learn things together. You can even guide part of this learning adventure. It doesn't just have to be me learning, it can be all of us learning. So I'm gonna put the Learn React link in here. That's the guide that we're following right now. And I'll put the Discord invitation in the chat. Invite people. All right, so in the Twitch chat, you will be able to see the Discord invite. Great. So let's continue looking at the quick start. We basically got through most of the quick start. The only thing that we were missing is how to handle props, right? So we learned that React is made of little components. All these components can be built together kind of like Lego bricks. And in order to pass information between different components, you need to use something called a prop. And what a prop is, I looked it up after our session yesterday because I was very curious. I actually asked ChatGPT a little bit. So let's go through what our question was and what ChatGPT says, right? So yesterday we left off saying, hey, can we pass any sort of function onto the next stage, onto our sub component as a prop? And ChatGPT gave us some answers. I think fundamentally I realized that what we actually were trying to figure out is actually what kind of data type can we pass through to a prop, right? Are we allowed to pass functions? Are we allowed to pass, primitive types like integers, all those things? What can we pass through? And it turns out, if you ask ChatGPT, it says you can pass primitive types, right? You can pass objects, you can pass functions, arrays, React elements, all these things, right? So let's take a closer look. So primitives, you can pass a number. Objects, it's saying you can pass objects as a prop, but passing objects, they recommend that you should be mindful about performance implications when passing objects, because objects are passed as references and they aren't really updated when you update the object, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue the stream. Sorry, this camera is a little bit mounted weird. Let me just adjust it real quick. Okay, there we go. Objects are passed as references. So what happens is when you pass an object to the next component, it only checks between references. So if you change the content of the object, React has no way of knowing, and it actually won't update that object in the subcomponent. So we'll talk about that in a second. But you can pass objects, right? You can pass functions, and you can pass arrays. And you can even pass other React elements, which is cool, right? You can pass React components to another component. All right, here's the part that's the most important. It says that it's worth mentioning that props in React are unidirectional, flowing from the parent to child component, right? So it only goes from the parent to the child and not from the child to the parent backwards. Parent components can pass any valid JavaScript expressions as props. So that's the key, right? Basically, anything you can put as a JavaScript expression, you can pass as a prop. The child component just needs to be designed to handle it appropriately, right? So meaning that if you can pass, if it's a valid expression and the child component can understand it, then that's fine, right? So it's important to consider the type and shape of the data you're passing. All right, so the next question I asked ChatGPT is, oh, thank you, it clears a lot of things up. And I asked about objects, right? Can you give me some details about what the subtleties of passing objects are? So ChatGPT says, certainly, objects when passed as props, there are a few important considerations, right? The first important consideration is that they're passed as object references. So if you take a look at this code below, I'll just summarize what ChatGPT said. This is a person, right? This is a person object. And this is the parent component passing the person object down to its child component, right? And this is the child component. When the parent component passes the person object to the child component, the child's going to print the person's name. Now, here's the problem. If the parent component changes the data inside the object, right? Like say we change from John to Smith, then the child component has no idea that you changed the contents because the reference of that person is still the same. You're just changing the contents, right? So the child component will not update properly, and that's going to be a big problem because you want the name to be displayed properly. So what can you do about that? Well, they said that you can, first of all, avoid doing that. You can pass immutable objects, so basically objects where you cannot change. That way, there's no chance that the object will be different with the same reference. And then you can also use a different type of use method, use effect. And when you use effect, you can ask it to manually update the UI with the object. So I think this is a more advanced feature. We don't have to care about that right now. We just need to know that when we pass objects, they're passed as references and React checks them as a reference, right? So as I said, thank you very much. This is super helpful. I'm always very impressed by what ChatGPT can do. It's crazy what AI can do nowadays, and it's crazy how well they can understand language. So I just asked them how you're able to do it. It gave me a very generic answer. So, but anyway, that's where we are. Let's continue on. So I'm really excited about this next part. We get to do the tutorial, the tic-tac-toe tutorial. So I don't know how many of you guys have done this before or tried learning React. I've always wanted to learn React, and I've never gotten around to making this tic-tac-toe tutorial because I'm always excited to try to make the app, but then I get stuck because I don't understand what I'm doing. So we're gonna do this tutorial together. Hopefully it gives us a lot of fundamentals on React.js, and we'll know we'll know exactly what we're doing. So when we run into issues, we can fix them. Tutorial. Tic-tac-toe. You will build a small tic-tac-toe game during this tutorial. This tutorial does not assume any existing React knowledge. The techniques you'll learn in the tutorial are fundamental to building any React application, and fully understanding it will give you a deep understanding of React. I will note that React probably had an engineer or an intern develop this application, and they probably made this tutorial they probably made this tutorial to highlight the most important parts of React and give us a better idea of the subtleties of React that's easier to give than in some sort of quick start guide. So I think this tutorial is going to be super useful. This tutorial is designed for people who prefer to learn by doing, which I like to do, and want to quickly try to make something tangible. If you prefer learning each concept step by step, start with describing the UI. All right, so this is describing the UI down there. We'll look at this later on. Let's just do the tutorial. So we have several sections. First is the setup. We're gonna set up our environment and overview. We're gonna finish the game, and then we're gonna add time travel. Time travel sounds fun. I'm very curious what that means. So what are we building? In this tutorial, we'll build an interactive tic-tac-toe game with React. You can see what it will look like when you're finished here. All right, so I guess this is the full game. Next player X. Go to game start. All right, so I guess we can play tic-tac-toe. Are you guys really good at tic-tac-toe? Because I'm not. Okay. Oh, okay, so I have to play myself, I guess. Okay. Okay, I've never played myself in tic-tac-toe, but I guess I've just made a tie for myself. So I guess that's what we're gonna make. Oh, I see. So this is the time travel feature, I'm guessing. Let's try to make a win. What happens when I win? Oh, okay. So it detects a winner. Cool. I'm gonna go grab some napkins for myself. It's really hot over here. It's almost like 100, like 90 something degrees outside. It's ridiculously hot. I need to grab something. I'll be right back. All right, sorry for the interruption. Okay, so let's take a look at the code real quick. We have a component. So these function square things, these are components, right? So we have a square component, we have a board component. What other components do we have? So this is the main component, which is the game. And then we have little handlers. All right. And we can tell that these are components. And okay, so quick question, you guys. How did I know that this is a component and that this is a handler or just a regular function? So I think the answer is, for components, it's a function and then a capital letter, right? That's the convention. If it's capitalized, it means it's a component. If it's lowercase, it's just a regular function, right? So in React, if it's capitalized, it's a component. All right, great. If the code doesn't make sense to you yet, or if you're unfamiliar with the code syntax, don't worry. The goal of this tutorial is to help you understand React and its syntax. We recommend that you check out the tic-tac-toe game above before continuing the tutorial. One of the features that you'll notice is that there's a numbered list to the right of the game's board. This list gives you a history of all the moves that have occurred in the game, and it is updated as the game progresses. Once you've played around with the finished tic-tac-toe game, keep scrolling. You'll start with a simpler template in this tutorial. Our next step is to set you up so that you can start building the game. All right, set up for the tutorial. In the live code editor below, click the fork in the top right corner to open the editor in a new tab using the website Code Sandbox. Code Sandbox lets you write code in your browser and preview how users will see the app you've created. The new tab should display an empty square and starter code for this tutorial. All right. So let's click the fork button. Just make this larger for you guys. Cool. So our sandbox is called Loving Fast LJGOT8. It's a funny name. All right, so here's some of our code. The code is gigantic in this. Okay, so here's some of our code, and there's an empty box with an X. You can also follow this tutorial using your local development environment. To do this, you'll need to install Node.js. In the Code Sandbox tab you opened earlier, press the top left corner, blah, 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 npm install, npm start. Okay. I'm considering if we should run this locally or run this on the browser. Let's just use the browser for now so everybody can follow along. We're just gonna use the browser. Now that you're set up, let's get an overview of React. Inspecting the starter code. In Code Sandbox, you'll see three main sections. The files section with a list of files like app.js, index.js, styles.css, and a folder called public. The code editor where you'll see the source code of your selected file. The browser section where you'll see how the code you've written will be displayed. Okay. The app.js file should be selected in the files section. The contents of that file in the code editor should be blah. Okay, that's what we saw. The browser does display an X. Now let's have a look at the files in the starter code app.js. In app.js, the code in app.js creates a component. That's what we've been learning. In React, a component is a piece of reusable code that represents a part of your user interface. Components are used to render, manage, and update the UI elements in your application. Let's look at the component line by line to see what's going on. Okay, cool. So this tutorial kind of explains what we read in the quick start guide. So it's always good to have a second go around at learning something, right? The first line of the function defines a function called square. All right. The export JavaScript keyword makes this function accessible outside of this file. Okay, that's good to know. The default keyword tells other files using your code that it's the main function in your file. Okay, so that's pretty cool too. So this is like saying main, and then this one is saying, hey, other files can use this function. The second line returns a button. The return JavaScript keyword means whatever comes after is returned as a value to the caller of the function. All right. Button is a JSX element. JSX is a combination of JavaScript code and HTML tags that describes what you'd like to display. Class name equals square is a button property or prop that tells CSS how to style the button. X is the text displayed inside of the button, and button closes the JSX elements to indicate any of the following content shouldn't be placed inside the button. Okay. Click on the file labeled styles.css. This file defines the styles of your React app. The first two CSS selectors, the asterisk and body, define the style of large parts of your app, while .square selector defines the style of any component where the class name property is set to square. Okay, so I guess a class name is defined by .square. Let's take a look. So we have styles.css. Okay, so I guess these things, I haven't used CSS in a long time, so we're gonna take a look at CSS. In fact, let's go to architecture. Let's put that into the front end where we have to learn, right? We need to educate ourselves on CSS. And also basic HTML. So I think if you're watching this one, you've probably seen some HTML, I hope. But if you haven't seen HTML, that's fine. We will continue on, and I think you'll pick it up, because HTML is basically just like a bunch of tags, and you'll see. I think you'll definitely pick up HTML as we go along this tutorial if you've never used it before. Okay, so this is CSS. Again, this star is like page wide, basically. Where is the dot? So I'm guessing these are all classes, right? The square class, the board row after, the status class, the game class, game info. All right. What else do we have? In your code, that would match the button from your square component in this app.js file. Okay. Let's see where the class. Okay, so we have the square class in the CSS. How about the app.js? Okay, so class name is set to square. That seems reasonable. Index.js. Click on the file name labeled index.js in the file section of the code sandbox. You won't be editing this file during the tutorial, but it is a bridge between the component you created in the app.js file and the web browser. All right. Let's just take a quick look at it. Okay, so it seems like it imports React, imports the style stuff, imports our app.js, and then it adds to our document, which is our HTML document with JavaScript. It adds to the root element our application, right? So I think in the future we'll understand this more too, but basically JavaScript has something called the DOM, which is the document object model. The DOM is able to represent the whole web page, right? Different components of the web page. And the first component of the web page is root. And in order to add our component, which is app.js, to the root, you just say, hey, render our app on root. Okay. Oh, and this talks about it, I guess. So lines 1 to 5 bring the pieces together. The remaining file brings all the pieces together and injects the final product into index.html in the public folder. Okay, cool. So building the board. Let's get back to app.js. This is where you'll need to spend most of the rest of the tutorial. I'm getting some emails. Okay. Currently, the board is only a single square, but you need 9. If you try to copy and paste your square to make 2 squares like this, you'll get this error. A JSON JSX must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Did you want a JSX fragment? Okay, so what is it saying? We need 9 squares. Okay, let's try it. Let's make the mistake that they told us to make. So they said make 9 buttons, right? Let's make 2 buttons because I'm too lazy to type 9. Okay, so it wants us to wrap it, right? So let's wrap these 2 in the wrapper. And we learned this on the last stream, but basically JSX only allows us to return something that's wrapped. It only allows us to return one component, right? So if you have 2 buttons, that's not one component, that's 2 components, right? So we need to make sure we only return one component. Cool, so now we have 2 boxes. What does it say now? Okay, so to fix it, we use fragments and we wrap the JSON elements just like that. So that's what we did. Now we have 2. Now we just need to copy and paste a few times to add 9 squares. All right, let's make 9 squares. Make 3, and then we'll copy and paste this 3 times. All right, there we go, 9 squares. Oh no, the squares are all in a single line, not in a grid like you need for our board. To fix this, you'll need to group your squares into rows with divs and add some CSS classes. While you're at it, you'll give each square a number to make sure you know where each square is displayed. Okay. In the app.js file, update the square component to look like this. Now, I'm as tempted as anybody else to just copy this into our code editor. I would love to do that because I'm lazy as well, but if I do that, I don't think I'll learn anything. So I'm going to not do that. Maybe I'll copy like a portion of it, but I'm not going to do the whole thing, right? Let's just figure out what this thing is trying to do. So right now we have 3 div classes. This separates them into each row. Each row has 3 columns, which are the buttons. Okay. So we have a CSS class called board row. Oh, okay, so that's not too difficult, right? So we basically just name the buttons with a number, and then we wrap them in a CSS div with a class called board row. Let's take a look over here. What's in our styles.css? Let's take a look. So we have board row right here. This is the CSS class. So board row, I'm assuming, oh, just copied something. Let me just silence my email. It's very distracting. So I'm not as familiar with CSS syntax. Let's use ChatGPT real quick. Hello, ChatGPT. We are on the tutorial, the tic-tac-toe tutorial on Learn React on React's Learn page. And what are we asking ChatGPT? Oh, that's right. We're looking at the example CSS code, give it the example. We understand what dot board row means. It means that there is a CSS class called board row. What does the colon after mean? All right, let's see what ChatGPT says. So it says, in CSS, the after pseudo element is used to insert content after the content of an element. Okay, so it allows you to add additional content such as text, images, other styling after the specified element. In the code example you provided, blah, the after pseudo element is applied to elements with a CSS class board row. It adds the pseudo element after each element with the class board row. Here's an explanation of each CSS property used in this example. Okay, so clear property specifies no floating elements are allowed on either side of the element. Okay. It ensures the content after board row elements appear below them and is not affected by any floating elements. Content empty means the content property specifies the content will be inserted after each board row element. In this case, an empty string is used, so no additional content is inserted. Oh, okay, so the content, okay, so you can literally insert strings after an element, which is really cool. The display table. The display property specifies how an element should be displayed. In this case, display table is used to create a block level element that behaves like a table. This ensures proper rendering and spacing of the pseudo element. Overall, the CSS code snippet is used in the tic-tac-toe example to provide proper clearing and spacing between the board row elements. It ensures that the rows are displayed correctly and the content is rendered below them. Well, thank you very much. Let's go back. Okay, interesting. So, after learning all of this, what does it mean? We need to implement it in our app.js. So, what did we learn? We learned that we should group. And if you guys know some keyboard shortcuts in this editor code sandbox, please let me know, because I don't know any shortcuts in here. It'd be nice to just add these elements with a shortcut. Okay, so first we group them in a div. Let's group them in sets of 3 divs. Actually, let's do one and then we'll copy and paste the other 3. So we have our first div. What did we need? We need to define the class, right? So in JSX, right, we can't just say class is equal to, like in regular HTML. We need to do class name is equal to. And then the class name is board row. And then, wow, look at that. By golly. We have 3, and then it does the nice little spacing thing that it's supposed to do. So I think that's pretty cool, right? Okay. Now we just need to do it to the other 9, and I'm really lazy, so this one I can copy and paste with good conscience. Wow, now we have a nice little square. I'm very curious, because I like to break things, what we can do with the content. So let's make a prediction. When we type into this content section, what's gonna happen, right? Are we gonna have some text? Where's the text gonna be? My prediction is that it's gonna clear, I don't know if it's in order, maybe it's gonna clear the board, right? So it's gonna clear this area first, and then it's gonna put some text right below it, and then maybe, I don't know, what's it gonna do? Let's try it out. So let's put winner. Okay, so that is right. So it basically cleared the row and then added the text right under it, right? This is pretty cool. It says you can add images. Oh, okay, let's see if we can add HTML here. Right, so let's bold winner. Does that work? No, it's just text. It's just a string. Okay, you can't bold something, but you can add regular stuff. Let's look up, let's ask ChatGPT. Let's ask it. If we want to add an image after the CSS element using the pseudo element, how do we do that? Oh, I see. Okay, so we can use the URL function. And that's the path to image. What kind of... Okay, so now I'm curious. How did you know we should add URL blah? Is this a function defined in CSS? Oh, it's not necessary. Here's okay, so here's something interesting with ChatGPT. We don't know if it's hallucinating or not. So I think I have to say this. Right now we're using ChatGPT to try to learn. We should definitely not take ChatGPT as gospel. It's literally a machine learning model. It learned from the internet. Who knows if it's right or wrong? You see, most of our learning comes from this tic-tac-toe tutorial, which comes from an official website, which is the React website. So like 95% of everything we're learning is from this tutorial. What ChatGPT did is it told us where to look for information. I want to warn you guys not to use ChatGPT as a professional source of learning, because like you saw over here, it's probably a little confused sometimes. Maybe it's not even confused, but it I don't know. Maybe what we asked it confused it. I'm not sure. But like I said, learn from an official source. Use ChatGPT as a learning tool and somebody to guide you. What I think of ChatGPT like is like a friend that probably knows quite a bit, but sometimes your friend could be wrong. So, like, just don't trust your friends to that level of expertise unless they're actually an expert, like a professional in the field, right? But friends are great because they'll help you out, they'll point you in the right direction, and they'll help you find resources. ChatGPT is like a friend that you always have because it's always here. And if you pay $20, you can get the upgraded friend version, apparently, which we still haven't used. We still have not used ChatGPT 4. Right now, we're still on, let me show you guys. I don't know why I paid for ChatGPT, to be honest. Maybe we should use ChatGPT 4, but there's like a 25 message limitation every 3 hours, and I feel like we'll run out of that really quickly. I think when we get to harder questions near the end, where it's not just tutorials, ChatGPT 4 will be much more useful because we have questions that don't require spitting out information from the internet. Most of the questions we asked so far, we can literally ask Google, and I think you'd get the same result. So let's save it for when we have more complicated questions. All right, so anyway, I got sidetracked. What were we talking about? We were talking about ChatGPT and how, this add URL function, right? So min error is not necessary when using the content property. Here's the corrected code. Okay. Oh, okay. Interesting. So let's see. Let's see if it's wrong or right. Let's see what ChatGPT did. I'm very, very curious now. So let's go to our code sandbox, and we're gonna add, let's look for an image. What's an image that we can find? We were doing rubber ducky, right? So let's do duck. Let's look for an image where we can steal from. I'm gonna copy the image address. I don't know why. I really love these giant rubber duckies. I think they're so cool. Like, just look at how big they are. They're literally bigger than these tugboats. It's crazy. And there's 2 of them. I love this thing. Is this in New York? Oh, this is in Hong Kong. Oh, the poor double duck deflates. Oh no! Look at him. Oh no. That poor boy. All right. So this is our URL. It's gonna be super long. Okay, so I can't tell if it works or doesn't work because we're feeding it some URL that is not our property. It could be that just it could be Google is not letting us pull from that URL. Let's try with a different URL. I should really have some images hosted on a server somewhere, you know. Oh, okay, so you weren't wrong, ChatGPT. It still worked. Come on, mister. You're fine. You don't have to apologize. It worked. All right, so what happens here? We do background image. I think this is wrong. Try that. What happens here? Okay. Okay, so let's delete that first of all. And then we're gonna look at background image. So what happens there? Nothing. Huh. Oh, did I do double quotes? I don't know if it likes double quotes. Okay, well, this is a silly thing to play around with, but let's tell ChatGPT. Are you sure you made a mistake? I tried out example and setting URL in content works fine, but if I set background image, nothing renders. But let's first see what it's saying. So it says URL, what am I saying? It says that URL is indeed a valid CSS function. I see. Okay. So URL is a valid CSS function. I wonder what type of CSS functions are available. Let's look that up later on. Today's camera it's like a little hot, so I have a ice pack strapped to this webcam. It's actually my DSLR, but the ice pack's a little heavy and it's causing it to like move around. I apologize for the confusion from my previous response. You are correct, and I apologize for my mistake. The background property is indeed used to set the background image for an element, but it cannot be used directly after the pseudo element. To add an image after the CSS element, using after pseudo element, you should use the content property along with the URL function. Here's the corrected code. By setting content property to URL blah blah, you can insert a specified image after the board role class. I apologize for my mistake in the previous response. Thanks for pointing it out. Okay, you're very welcome. How did you know you made a mistake? Okay, it gives a bunch of generic stuff again. It just says I'm trained with a bunch of stuff. In this case, when you mentioned the background image property was not rendering the image as expected, it indicated to me that there might be an error in my previous response. Upon reviewing the information, I realized I made a mistake by suggesting the use of background image. I strive to provide accurate information, but I can still make errors. Thanks for bringing the discrepancy to my attention. I appreciate your feedback, your understanding. Interesting. All right, interesting. So I don't know what it actually thinks. This is kind of crazy. In this world, we have AI now. All right, so continuing on with our application. Now we understand what this after keyword is. I think this is super valuable. So to those of you watching, I want to just say something real quick. I know that most of you just want to blast through these tutorials and then get to the end. Like, let's get to the end. Here's what I've learned throughout the years. It turns out that if you try really hard to get to the end and just kind of scrap everything together, yes, things will work. But you'll also start running into a lot of crazy problems, and then you'll be out of luck trying to fix them. That's happened to me so many times. I'll make a small little prototype and it starts working. I get so excited, like, wow, this prototype works. Like, I'm so excited, right? I show it off to the world and everybody's so excited to see it. And then I realize, oh, I want to add a feature, right? I want to add a feature that wasn't in this tutorial because most of the features that I learned was from the tutorial. So now I'm expected to, or I want to make something that's unique in the world. When I'm trying to do that, I notice that I don't have the foundation to make something useful. Like, it's basically I'm using derivative work, right? I'm making work that's derivative, and it's so similar to the derivative work that I can't make something new myself. The reason is because I don't have the fundamental knowledge, like the strength and the background knowledge, right? I realized that diving deeper into these tutorials actually helps you in the long run and makes you learn faster, even though it doesn't seem like it, right? Imagine if we didn't look at the after tag. We'll basically need to go to a CSS tutorial and then maybe we'll happen to run into this after tag someday, right? But now, because we're using it, we might as well learn about it, right? So I hope this isn't too boring for you guys. Hope this is at least useful information, because it's useful for me. That's why I'm looking at it. Okay, continuing on. Let's put our ducky back. I like our ducky. Let's just keep our ducky here for now. Okay, let's not. It's way too big. Let's put content. Alright, cool. So what else do we need? I think the tutorial wanted us to number these guys. I'm gonna see if I can select. Trying out different shortcuts. Okay, I cannot. Alright, so we're just gonna replace these with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8, 9. All right, so we have a big error here. Cannot assign to read-only property message of the object. What did we do here? What did we break? We basically did not create the right component because we missed a bracket. All right, cool. Now our board is numbered. Now we know which board corresponds to which button. Next, what do we need to do? The CSS defined in the CSS styles the div with the class name of board row. Now that you've grouped your components into rows with the style divs, you have your tic-tac-toe board. All right, that is much easier than expected, mainly because they did all the CSS for us. But now you have a problem. Your component name square really isn't a square anymore. Let's fix that by changing the name to board. Okay. My component name square is no longer a square. Is it not a square? It's still a square, right? Is this a rectangle? I'm confused. The heck? This looks squarish to me. Am I out of my mind? Is it longer? I don't know. Okay, whatever. I guess my eyes are deceiving. So we're gonna name this a board. Oh, our component name square. Oh, I see. I apologize. So what this is actually saying is that since we added 9 components to 9 buttons to our quote-unquote square, it's not actually a square, which is true. It's actually, I mean, it's still squarish, but it has 9 components, and the proper lexicon or the proper like term to use is board. Okay, so let's call this a board. I feel like it's gonna disappear, right? It disappeared. So before we look at the tutorial, let's try to fix it ourselves. How long have we been streaming? It's already 50 minutes. Wow. All right, so how are we gonna fix this? Well, we basically, from app.js, okay. I don't know how to fix this. How do we fix this? Board. So our component is called board, right? It used to be called square. Who uses square? Where is square? Baggage? app.js? What's the issue? Console. Oh, did we not have the right closing tag? Let's put it back to square. Oh. Okay, so I'm sorry. I am also like ChatGPT and I make mistakes. Our browser thing was just broken. It wasn't the code. It literally, there was an error with the browser. Okay, so now it's called board. Cool. What next? At this point, your code should look something like that. Yep, it looks exactly like that. Psst, we have a lot. That's a lot to type. It's okay to copy and paste code from this page. However, if you're up for a little challenge, we only recommend copying code you've manually typed at least once yourself. I agree with you, React. I agree. Passing data through props. All right, this part I'm excited for. Next, you'll want to change the value of the square from empty to X whenever the user clicks on the square. With how you've built the board so far, you would need to copy and paste the code that updates the square 9 times, once for each square you have. Instead of copying and pasting, React's component architecture allows you to create a reusable component to avoid messy duplicated code. First, you're going to copy the line defining your first square. Okay. From your board component into a new square component. Okay, I really like this tutorial because it's basically... Somebody's calling me. I really like this tutorial because it's basically doing what a... this call might be important. It's okay. We're basically doing what we would do in normal development. So I think in normal development, we usually would write some raw HTML with some HTML elements. And then after we do that, we want to expand it, right? Like we make a small little project and then we're like, hey, let's add new features. How do we make it more complex? And to make it more complex, you just need to add new layers of abstraction, right? We talked about abstraction a few days ago. This is basically taking a complicated or like a simple unit and then like putting additional abstraction on top of it. Let's go back here. So it says take one button. We'll take one button. And what are we gonna do? We're gonna make something called a square. Okay, so that's why they wanted us to rename board, because they wanted to reuse the square component name. So let's go back here. What did they want us to do? So where do we add this? Do we add this on the top or the bottom? I think we can add it to the top. So in this JavaScript file, we're gonna create a function, right? This function creates a component called square. And what do we do in square? We're gonna return, right? We need any component returns something. What does it return? It returns one JSX element. So how are we going to return the JSX element? We're going to return one button. Great. And why is this not happy? Okay, so it says we never use the component. All right, cool. So before we go back to the tutorial, let's try to test out this component, right? So from what we learned, we know that to declare a component, you just use the component name, you end it, and then bam. And lo and behold, look at what we have. This is so exciting. This is our first time using a component ourselves, right? We made a square component. We put a button there. It returns a button. This is our Lego building block. And then we put the Lego piece down, right? We made a square. Now, if we change this to 6, see, this reflects, right? Like 1,000 whatever, it reflects, right? So this is pretty cool. Okay, so let's go back to our tutorial. So, you see, look at that. So then you'll update the board to render the square component using JSX syntax, right? So we did that for one of them. So I guess you don't need to open and close the square because it's just a single, like there's no props inside of it and there's nothing to sandwich between it. Which begs the question, what happens if we put like 1 here? Nothing. Except for some syntax errors, I guess. Okay. So let's use their syntax, right? It's the same thing. So we're gonna do this 3 times. Remove this guy. So now we have a problem where all of them are 1s because it's all being referenced from this small unit, which is fine. We're gonna fix that later. Okay, cool. Great. So how are we gonna make this keep track of if there's an X or not? Should we do this ourselves? Maybe. We learned about use state before. Do you guys remember how to use state? Because I don't recall the syntax of it. But that's not gonna stop me. I'm gonna use state, like, what was that thing called? The X button, right? So filled. So I remember use state has 2. Oh, I remember. It has 2 elements to it, right? Use state has. Oh, okay. Sorry, the syntax is wrong. You gotta put the 2 elements here so it can decompose it. So this will be filled and then set fill. Okay, this autocomplete is quite annoying. Fill. Set fill. Okay. And how do we use state? Let's see if. Okay, let's not look at the answer yet. Let's go back to our previous quick start guide from yesterday. Right, quick start. Let's look at use state. Okay, so first we need to import use state. Let's do that. So this is like state management basically, right? So we import use state. What else do we do? Ah, okay, so we were kind of close. We need to make it const. Why do we make it const? Let's see. Okay, so let's ask ChatGPT why we use const, right? To make a use state, to make a new state with use state, the example shows why do we need to include const? It declares a constant variable. Okay. The const is used to declare a constant variable named count. It is initialized with the value returned by useState hook. The useState hook returns an array with 2 elements, the user state value and the function to update the value. Okay. The const keyword is used to ensure that the variable count cannot be reassigned to a different value. Oh, so it maintains immutability. I see. So by convention, when using useState hook, the first element of the return array is the assigned variable. All right, cool. Cool, so what the const keyword is telling us is that we don't want other people to use that variable again, right? We don't want to accidentally override that state because set count is the one keeping track of the state, right? So if, for example, I end up touching that state, like I make a new version of count and then I touch count, then the state machine, like the use state handler, what's it called again? The use state is the hook. The use state hook doesn't know that I did that and things will be really wonky. Okay, so let's go back to our tutorial. Let's try it ourselves. So we do use, so this is const, right? Const. And then also this is an array of 2 elements. So This is like array deconstruction. And then we're gonna set the initial value of useState. So let's call it filled, true. Okay. It must be called at the top level. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So we can't just call it in the function, right? We need to call it inside of a component, right? So let's put it inside the component. So let's take a look at the error. How did I know that, right? How did I know what I did wrong, right? You read the error message. So a lot of people, I think, they kind of struggle with what to do when things go wrong. I think I am lucky because I grew up with people that kind of showed me how to debug things. It turns out that if you read the error messages and really try to understand the error messages, most of the time you'll figure out why something is broken. And in fact, modern compilers and like these interpreters are so good that they basically already know the common mistakes that people make, and they make the messages in these like interpreters so smart. Like they'll already know what most people like make mistakes with, and then they'll already like tell you how to fix it, right? So let's take a look at the error message together. This says invalid hook call. Hooks can be only called inside of a body of a function component. So if you just gloss over these tutorials that we're working on and don't really understand it, these error messages will be useless to you. You will literally not understand what these error messages mean, right? You'll just be confused. What is a hook? What is inside of a function component, right? We need to make sure we know the vocabulary. When we're programming, we're basically using words to instruct a computer to do something. Words are very important in programming. The exact definition of a word is very important, right? Hooks have no other meaning but hooks, right? A function has no other meaning than a function. You need to really understand what each keyword means. If you understand the exact meaning of each keyword, you'll figure out how to solve a problem much, much faster. Instead of just having a fuzzy idea of what a function is or what a component is, like you think a component is some sort of thing like that, you need to know exactly what it is, and then the error messages make a lot of sense, right? So translating from error to fixing the problem, we see that our hook call, right? This is the hook that we're using, useState. It's a hook. useState can only be called inside the body, right? So what's a body? A body is between two curly brackets, right? That's inside the scope, the like content of something. And what's inside the content of something? Or what should it be in? It should be in a function component. And what's a component? Square, right? So this error message says this hook can only be inside a component. Which component do we want it to be in? Square. So we put it there. Okay, so now we have it in there, and again, I don't even know if this works. This is just me experimenting, but at least the interpreter is not complaining. So what were we trying to do? We're trying to make it so when we click the button, it fills up, right? So we're gonna do a on-click handler somewhere. Where are we gonna put the on-click handler? We want it for all buttons, right? So each button is gonna handle its own on-click. On-click, and then we're gonna do handle click. So this is kind of like the tutorial we did yesterday, right? Okay, and then we're gonna define our own function called handle click. And what's it gonna do? Well, let's see. Oh, what is it complaining about? Cannot assign read-only property. Okay, so what's the problem here? Well, okay, so let's take a look at another error. It says, cannot assign read-only property message of an object. JSX value should be either an expression or a quoted JSX text. All right, so normally when you read this, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, like what is it trying to tell me? A JSX value. What is JSX? JSX is this stuff here, right? Anything between brackets in JavaScript. This is the language, the template language JSX. The value, right? So values are things after the equal sign, right? So this thing should be either an expression or a quoted JSX text. So what is a quoted JSX text? That's this square, right? So that's some text. What is a whatchamacallit? What is a expression? An expression is just one thing that we can send through JavaScript, right? It's like one thing that fits inside, like it's an expression. So this needs to be an expression. To make an expression, we need curly brackets, right? So now it's happy, right? So in handle click, what do we do? So when we click it, let's set fill. Let's call set fill. And how do we set the fill? Okay, so originally we want it to be false, right? This is the initial condition, right? Use state initial condition. And then the fill, let's see how to use it because I forgot. Set count. Okay, so we basically set it, right? So let's make it toggle, right? So if you click it, it'll set it to, it'll invert it, right? So can we do not, I don't know JavaScript well enough. Can we do not fill? Is this Python? This is not Python. So not fill. Does that work? Too many re-renders. Okay, so this makes an infinite loop. Why? Handle click, on click. I don't know why. How to not a JavaScript Boolean. Logical not. Okay, so it is an exclamation mark. Too many. Okay, so maybe we need to consult our tutorial. This is where we play around with things and we have gotten to a point where it's not working. So can we do that tyranny operator? So if handle if fill, can I make like fill and like I don't know, like X. Still, too many errors in quick succession. I really want to know what's wrong with this. Square, the button, there's an on-click handler, handle click. Let's see, how do you make an on-click handler in JavaScript? On-click, right? Is on-click. Oh, I see what the problem is. All right, do you guys see what the problem is? This is a definition. This is like a syntactical issue, right? So you see here over here on click, you want to pass the function, right? You don't want to apply the function. You don't want to use the function, right? So what does that mean? This is passing a function as a pointer. So it points to the function as a reference, right? It references that function. So it's saying on click, look at that function and do it. If I put two parentheses behind it, look at what I did. Look at what I did. I put this here, right? This says do the function. So what is it gonna do? It's gonna basically set fill to not fill, right? It's gonna just do this function and it's just gonna keep rendering that. So let's remove that. There we go. Look at that. Nothing there. Moment of truth. We're gonna try to click it. Oh, it works! I can't believe it. Guys, it works. Okay, I honestly did not think that I could do it. I really didn't think that would work. Okay, well, this is our first application of React. This is really fun. I think this is like really, really exciting. We're getting around to an hour, which is when we usually end the stream, but I'm so excited, guys. This is definitely not the way the tutorial is gonna do it, but what did we do here? We basically used our own use state, right? We used our own hook. We set up the hook. We worked through a bunch of error messages. This is what I like about programming. You get to build your own stuff. You get to tell the computer to do what you want it to do, right? You think it, you do it, right? This is so fun. Let's compare to what the tutorial tells us to do, right? Okay, so back to the tutorial. What's it gonna try to tell us to do? Update the board to render the square components. All right, unlike the browser divs, your own component board and square must start with a capital letter. Okay. Oh no, you've lost number of squares you had before. They all say 1. Okay, we know that. We want it to display a value. Okay, so let's learn from the tutorial now. Let's undo what we did. So now each square says 1. To fix this, you will use props to pass each value of this the value of each square. Sorry, I can't read. You lost the number squared you had before. Now each square says the number 1. To fix this, you will use props to pass the value each square should have from the parent component board to its child square. Update square component to read the value prop that you'll pass from the board. Okay, so here's the problem with our implementation, right? Remember that in the tutorial and what ChatGPT said, parents can only pass information to the child, right? You cannot pass information from the child back to the parent. So this is why they call lifting the state, right? So if you draw a tree diagram and all the arrows point down to the little nodes, there's no way to point it up. So the only way you can pass information up is to keep track of the information higher up, right? That's all you can do. You can't, there's no, I mean, just the way React is built, there's no like back and forth, right? I think this helps because if there was a way to pass information back up, you might have a problem where they'll pass it back up, pass back down. You have like a bunch of different like unexpected errors. So I think that's the way they architected it. So we're gonna lift the state, right? We're gonna lift the state by doing what they say. We're not gonna try to do it ourselves anymore. Let's just learn from the tutorial. So to lift the state, we're gonna add our own, what does it say? Okay, add a prop to square called value. All right, we can do that. So square is gonna have a value, right? Okay, so this is a prop. The way you define a prop is you put curly brackets and then the prop name. Okay. The value, the function square value indicates the square component can be passed as a prop. Okay, now you want to display the value. Okay, we could do that. Try doing this. Okay, so this is what they're trying to tell us, right? So if we just use the text value here, okay, so let's ignore our, okay, so we can still do it. So if we just do value, like they said, it's all value. How do we use JavaScript expressions inside JSX? Like I said before, we use curly brackets, right? So curly brackets and then don't paste in random stuff, paste in value. Cool, now it should show a value. But what's the problem? We're not passing a value onto square. So let's use value and then we'll pass in 1. Bam, you see the first square has 1. What's happening here? It's basically using this prop, substituting it in to this value over here, right? And we don't need all these files right now, right? Let's shrink it. Wait, this tic-tac-toe board is not that big. Okay, cool. So we got that part, value. We're trying to anticipate what this is trying to say. You want to render a JavaScript variable called value, not the word value, to escape, blah, blah, blah. Add curly braces around value. Okay, that's what we did. For now, you should see an empty board. This is because we haven't passed the value in. Let's pass the value in. Okay, so that's what we did already. Let's just copy and paste this into the other squares because they're also square. 2, 3. I hate typing numbers. Do you guys know how to type numbers better than me? Because I suck at typing numbers. I even tried learning to type numbers, like touch type numbers, but it's so far away from the home row, my fingers always miss. All right, so we have our numbers back on the tic-tac-toe board. Continuing on, what does it want us to do? We should see a list of numbers. Great. Passing data through props. Your updated code looks like this. Ours kind of looks like that. We have a bunch of random state junk because we were messing around. But that's fine. this doesn't affect anything. So if we click the state thing, what happens? So basically, if we click on them, we're updating the state, but we can't see the state. But actually, we can console. You can see what happens. See? It's actually still working. You just can't see it. Anyway. Making an interactive component. Okay, so click handler. Okay, so let's fill the square component with an X when you click it. Declare a function called handle click inside of the square. Then on click to the props of the button JSX element returned from the square. Okay, I did not understand a single word I read. Let's fill the square component with an X when you click it. All right, declare a function called handle click inside of the square. Okay, so a function called handle click inside the square. Okay, that's what we did. Then add on click to the props of the button JSX element return from square. Okay, so an on click. Okay, that's what we did too. So we actually already did that. But it says let's print out clicked instead of doing this like negating thing, which is fine. Okay. If you click on the square now, you should see a log saying clicked in the console at the bottom of the browser section. Clicking the square more than once will log clicked again. Repeated console logs with the same message will not create more lines in the console. Instead, you'll see an incrementing counter next to your first clicked log. Okay, let's try it. Oh, okay, so I don't know if you guys can see it. Oh, I'm sorry, my face is in the way. Okay. So you see, first it was clicked, and then now if I zoom in, it says 22. That means I clicked this button 22 times. I click it a few more times, zoom in a little bit again. It says 29, so that's what they mean. Note, if you are following this tutorial using local development, you need to open your browser's console. Okay, for those of you that are doing it locally, I'll show you guys how to do that. First of all, you just go to, okay, I don't know. Oh, you go to developer and then JavaScript console, and bam, console is here. Okay, so for those of you that are doing it locally. Okay, let me move my face again because it's again blocking everything. All right, so what's next? As a next step, you want the square component to remember that it got clicked. Fill it with an X mark. To remember things, components use state. So this is the special use state function that we're talking about. Import use state at the top of the file. Remove the value prop from the square component. Instead, add a new line at the start of the square that calls use state. Have it return a state variable called value. Okay, that's fine. So let's modify what we had. We called it fill, they called it value. So let's change this to value. What next? What is this? Oh, so you see there's a problem here, right? What is the problem before we look at the error message? I think that we already declared value here and we want to make a constant called value over here, right? So I think that's not happy. Let's remove that guy. Okay, cool. We're saying set value is not used. That's fair. All right. What are we gonna do? Value stores the value, set value sets the value. Makes sense. It's basically setting the initial condition to null, which is nothing. The null value passed to use state is used as an initial value, so value starts off equal to null. Okay, since the square component no longer accepts props anymore, you'll remove the value prop from all 9 square components. All right, some useless typing over here. Is there a way to select multiple? Nope. If you guys have time, I really recommend you guys at least learn some Vim, VI, Vim. Vim is just VI improved. But Vim would make this so easy. I love Vim. But also Vim takes a lot of it just makes you a little bit tired because you have to keep clicking, typing to move your cursor around instead of just moving the mouse around. But I like Vim. I use it a lot at work. If you guys are interested, I can make a Vim tutorial someday. Okay, so we've removed the props. What else do we need to do? Okay, so now it looks like this. Cool. Now you'll change square to display an X when clicked. We're gonna set the value to X. Okay. Cool. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna set value, right? Which is a function that useState defined for us. And oh, so useState is false now. We don't want it to be false. We want it to be null. So we're gonna set the value to capital X. All right, so I think by this time, yeah, everything is all hooked up. Let's try it. Ah, it works. Now, there's one less feature than ours. If you click it again, it doesn't disappear. Ours toggles the state. Anyway, okay. Next. By calling the set function from an on-click handler, you're telling React to re-render the square whenever the button is clicked. After the update, the square's value will be X, so you'll see the X on the game board. Click on any square and X should show up. Okay. Each square has its own state. The value stored in each square is completely independent of others. When you call a set function in a component, React automatically updates the child component inside too. After you made the above changes, your code will look like this. Okay, that's what our code looks like. React Developer Tools. React DevTools let you check the props and state of your React components. You can find the React DevTools at the bottom of the browser section in Code Sandbox. I like this feature a lot. I've never used this feature, but I like the sound of it already. This seems like it would make life really useful. And again, my big face is in the way. Down here, React DevTools. I like this. This is pretty cool. So why do we have two boards here? I'm not sure. Where is the second board? Did I delete it? The heck? Okay, whatever. For some reason, we're rendering two boards, even though we have one app. Maybe that's from an older. We have three boards. Okay, mind blowing. Okay, so we click on square. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So you click on it, you can see what props this thing has. You can see what hooks this thing is using and what the state is for the hook. That's cool. That's really cool. But why doesn't it tell you the name of the state? See, that would be useful. But our state is just state. How do we separate states from states? What if we put a second state here? I'm just curious. It calls value 2. How do we know the second state? Value 2. Set value 2 to y. Okay. Great. How do we? Okay. So it just tells you the state, but it doesn't tell you the state name. Is it because it's too small? Do I need to make it bigger? No. Okay, so for the hooks, it only tells you what values are in the hook, I guess. It doesn't tell you the name of the value. That's unfortunate. Maybe I don't know how to use this thing. To inspect a particular component, use the button on the top left corner of React Dev Tools. Okay, that's what we did. Note, for local development, React Dev Tools is available in Chrome. Okay. Completing the game. By this point, you'll have all the basic building blocks for your tic-tac-toe game. To have a complete game, you now need to alternate placing X's and O's on the board, and you need a way to determine a winner. So, this is what we were talking about before, right? We need to lift the state. So why do we need to lift the state? Well, because each individual component keeps track of the state by itself, right? So each component only knows about its own state. If you make multiple buttons, the button will know all about itself, but not its neighbors, right? It's all private information. So we made a bunch of squares. Now the squares can't talk to each other. In order for each of the squares to talk to each other, what you need to do is to lift the state. You need to raise where the state was to a higher level, right? That way, the person dealing with all the states can handle each of the squares. It's like a puppeteer, right? You have like a little puppeteer master, and its little feet are, it's controlling the little feet, right? You can't have the little feet control each other, but you can have the little ducky control the little feet, right? So that's how I think of it. The little feet can't control the duck can only control the little feet. So what are we looking at here? We want to lift the state. So how would we approach that? At first, you might guess the board needs to ask each square for that square's state. Although this approach is technically possible in React, we discourage it because the code becomes difficult to understand, susceptible to bugs, and hard to refactor. Instead, the best approach is to store the game state in the parent board component instead of in each square. The board component can tell each square what to display by passing a prop, like you did when you passed a number to each square. Okay, so like what we were saying before. To collect data from multiple children or to have two child components communicate with each other, declare the shared state in their parent component instead. The parent component can pass that state back down to the children via props. This keeps the child components in sync with each other and with their parent. Okay, this is super useful. Lifting state in the parent component is common when React components are refactored. Let's take this opportunity to try it out. Edit board components so that it declares a state variable named squares that defaults to an array of 9 null corresponding to 9 squares. Okay, I think we're at the 1.5 point almost already. So this seems like a good stopping point. What did we do today? So today we started, let me switch. So what did we do today? Today we started on the tic-tac-toe tutorial. We went through the tutorial and we tried it out. We did not copy and paste things. We tried to understand what we learned from the quick start guide and apply it to the React tutorial, right? We learned about some CSS like after tag, right? We learned about CSS classes. We also learned how to use the components we made, and we made our first components, and we also were able to implement our own state machine, right? Without the without the state machine, or without the tutorial, we were able to use the state and make our own little clicky buttons, right? We learned that, hey, we can make the buttons respond to clicks, but they can't talk to each other, and we need a mastermind to coordinate this whole game. So what do? We need to lift the state, right? So we're at a good stopping point because we have the application where we have each button. We have an application where we can click each of the squares, but all of these squares, okay, so here's what we're talking about. The state machine over here, this hook set use state is inside the square. So when we come back tomorrow, we're gonna move this out here, and then we're gonna assign the values, each value to an array, and then we're gonna give those values to each square. All right. So I really hope you guys enjoyed the stream today. I'm sorry I'm a little bit sweaty today. It's really hot in my room. It's just really hot in general all over the place. And yeah, please let me know in the comments what I can help you guys with. I would love to have more people join our Discord channel to ask questions, to do the tutorial with me so I don't have to talk to the camera by myself. Join the Twitch chat, you know, like if you're too shy to come on the Discord channel, you can always chat in the chat box. I'll read the chat. And yeah, please feel free to follow along to our content. I really want to make this a collaborative community where everybody can come together and ask questions, learn, you know, improve themselves and get ready for the future, right? We also want to learn to use ChatGPT in a responsible manner, right? We don't want to use ChatGPT to like build the app for us. You notice we haven't asked ChatGPT to code the app for us because one, it makes us useless. Like, what's the point of asking the computer to do it? I don't even know how to do it. So I want to learn how to do it, not be told how to do, right? Like, not be told that this is how you do it. I want to figure it out. And ChatGPT is a great tool if you keep the mindset of, hey, it's a great guide to looking for resources. Yeah, so again, please join the Discord channel. I'll put the Discord channel on the YouTube comments, on the Twitch comments. Please have a great rest of your day. I am really excited to continue this tutorial tomorrow. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you guys soon.